Good morning, folks. This is Brett with Grafted Branch, and today's video is going to be how I turn one of these two logs into a beautiful table. Hey folks, so right here I'm using what they call a beam cutter. I've mounted a 2x6 to my log with also using some 2x4s and some screws, and then you attach the beam cutter to your saw and it just rides down that 2x6. This is the first time I ever used it, and it was also the last. It is not something for delicate work like something you would use to make furniture, but it's more for making boards for a barn. So but in the future, I'll use something different. We jump now to the table being all glued up, but I didn't get good video or any pictures or anything of that, so I apologize, but this is where we're at. So the next stage was epoxying. I'm just showing you here that I used blue painter's tape for patching all the cracks and holes to help hold the epoxy in. It worked really good for what I was doing. It was a cheap option that worked good. It didn't stick too bad. A couple things I would have did. I edged this table to catch the epoxy so there wasn't drips, but I should have changed out that tape after every single coat, and I didn't. There's a hole that I filled and some cracks. I had a challenge with that hole. I filled the bottom half, and then when I went to fill the top half, I ended up with a whole lot of bubbles. And so in that, you'll see what I ended up having to do here in a minute. But I ended up having to get the Dremel and Dremel the hole out to get the bubbles out. That's what this is showing here. And the video will zoom in there on a little, tiny little bubbles right there on the one end. And so I actually ended up Dremeling this out twice to get all the bubbles. So a couple of these pictures will show you the different stages of that. So yeah, it was a little bit of a challenge. That's after the first dremeling, and then you still see some bubbles right there along the edges where the boards meet, and then that's after dremeling the second time, and it turned out pretty good after dremeling the second time. And then this is just part of the process. You sand down in between each coat so that the second coat and the third coat will stick to the first and second coat. I use some 180 grit there to do that. And then this is getting onto the finished, what the finished top look like with 3 coats of epoxy. On this table, I ended up using about 2 gallons of epoxy, a little over $200 worth. So these legs, I went into the metal shop and bought metal, and I had a friend of mine from work weld those up for me and attach those with some lag bolts. Notice I went across the breadboards there, and that was just to help sturdy up the ends so that they say the moisture can cause those ends to pop off if they're not secured well. So here's a couple of pictures of the table after they got done and then and put in its place. And then here's a video that I just recently made. Sorry for the light glaring off of it, but that just shows you how glossy of a finish we have. This table ended up being about, it's, what is it, 5.5 feet long, 30 inches wide. It's perfect for like a breakfast table or a small dining table, and it just turned out absolutely beautiful. Here I'm going to point out, this is the ray fleck right here. That's where you get the quarter sawn, and this table turned out absolutely beautiful, and I was very impressed myself at how good it looked. The uncles were just over here today looking at it, and they were once again amazed, as they always are. This hole here, I poured twice, and I had some issues with it. Got most of the bubbles out in the long run, but it's not perfect. I'm going to show you here in a second how you can see through that hole. I put a light under it, and you'll be able to see the light through it. Maybe I'm getting ready to do that right here, it looks like. There you go, goes all the way through. And that was just where I'd put some blue painter's tape on the bottom of that and started filling with epoxy, and that just keeps it from dumping all out over the table. But yeah, the center two boards on this were kind of what you would call book matched. I mean, they're not exactly, because I was cutting them with a chainsaw and we had to plane quite a bit. But when you stand back and look at it, you can kind of see the book matching, and especially down at the other end. But yeah, it turned out really well. There's some more quarter sawn. The two center boards are quarter sawn. The outside, all the way around the edge, came off of one of the other boards that was, what do you call it? Sapwood. And it was all the same log, but the sapwood looks quite a bit different than the heartwood. So, but yeah, there's little cracks and lots of knots and stuff in it, and they all just got filled with epoxy, and it turned out great. I just used some basic bar top epoxy for this. That's why I had challenges with that hole that I filled. But other than that, things went really well. It took, I believe, 3 coats, and then lots of little touch-ups. See there, you can see the book matching a little bit when you look at it. You can see the different knots that kind of go together. So right here, I'm going to show you where I fastened the legs to the table. Sorry for the glare, but I just used some lag bolts and intentionally went across from one board to the main part of the table to just sturdy that up, any potential issues of wood movement. And then I'm going to show you underneath the table, the bottom of the table, here in just a second, and there's a very clear chainsaw mark in the bottom of that, and that's where I was saying at the beginning that planking tool that I was using, that right there is a chainsaw mark. It doesn't work too good for furniture, so had to do a lot of planing and sanding in order to overcome that, and that's why the bottom got epoxied smooth just like the top, so when you run your hand across it, you didn't notice. So thank y'all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Hopefully we'll get some more stuff built like this someday. So thanks again. God bless.